Assalamu alaikum, dear family and friends. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to get on before we begin. Again, Assalamu alaikum. With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. Greetings of peace and welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening. My name is Fitrah Muhammad, moderator for this three-part series on creating community wealth through land development and operating a nonprofit organization, community corporations, CDCs. Last week, we discussed the importance of keeping good financial records. This week, our panelists will share their experience with us on opening and operating a community development corporation. These series have been planned for you by Study Al-Islam and Masjid Muhammad, the nation's mosque. Welcome. So I want to first say thank you to our panelists for accepting the invitation. I know you've had a long day, and so we really appreciate you coming on to share your experience, your years of experience and leadership. I'm going to start with Sister Majeedah. Sister Majeedah, you are the Chief Operating Officer for Nicetown CDC, which is a model that many of us don't know about. This CDC is owned by your family. For many years, I thought it was a part of the Masjid, and it wasn't until just a year ago when Zakaria, I think the president of the CDC, was on, and he clarified that. So could you give us some information about what is a family-owned CDC? Can you take yourself off mute?
Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum, and I appreciate being invited to participate this evening. A family-owned CDC, from our perspective, is a CDC that was basically founded by Zakaria Abdul Rahman, and you'll see more of that in my slide. But he included and integrated his family members to perform specific duties with the CDC, such as physical management, operations, property acquisition, and things of that nature. We also have other leadership on our board that has years of experience doing development, economic development, housing, and things like that. So, but it was started by family, and today is still run by family. It's controlled by family.
Before we move on, please, can you briefly introduce yourself to the audience? I've been knowing you for years, and many of us know you, but just briefly give us some background on your experience and years of being in Philadelphia.
I've been in Philadelphia all my life. Again, my name is Majeedah Rashid. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Nicetown Community Development Corporation. And I have been for like 18 years now. I started out as the Chief Information Officer initially, and began to do a lot more things operationally with programming and things like that. My background is I studied community economic development from a resident-driven perspective at the University of Southern New Hampshire. And I am currently, I was the former chair of the Philadelphia City Land Bank and currently still a member of the Philadelphia City Land Bank. I am the secretary on there. I am the vice president of the Philadelphia Association of CDCs. And I also sit on a number of other boards related to a lot of the things we do in the community, schools and things like that. Mm-hmm. So my background is kind of diverse and interrelated with what we do.
So you have developed a PowerPoint for us so that we can see how a family-owned CDC works. Let me just ask before you go to the PowerPoint. When did you start? When did Nicetown CDC first open and operate?
Well, we were incorporated in 1999, and I think we first opened with our first funded project in 2003.
Mm.
Mhm.
Will the PowerPoint speak to that?
Pretty much. So,
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and share your PowerPoint with us?
can you see that?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So basically, as we just discussed, some of the background with this is Zachariah Abdulrahman is the primary founder and current president and CEO of the Nicetown Community Development Corporation. He built the board with his family, community partners, and other members with decades of experience in community economic development.
Hmm.
So basically, one of the main things that we had to do, as you guys well know, is that you have to establish a board. And our board was appointed with members who had decades of experience. We had board members that were like known gurus and masters in their own areas of business, real estate, supportive services, housing, and economic development. This is to bring capacity and leadership to the table. A lot of times when you start a new CDC or new nonprofit, you basically start with nothing. You have no resources, no funding, and boards are basically responsible for bringing those resources to the table and sustaining them to establish programs and projects that fulfill our mission. So basically, once our board was developed, and we basically have the same, almost the same board that we had when we initially started. I think we changed a couple board members since that time, but our main thing, one of the good things about that is we maintain consistency, uniformity in terms of fulfilling our mission. And again, we were incorporated in the state of Pennsylvania in 1999. And our mission is to dynamically improve the quality of life in Nicetown and surrounding neighborhoods. We want effective and sustainable community economic development initiatives. And what we mean by community economic development is not just business, but also affordable housing, market rate housing, as well as affordable. In today's market, especially in Philadelphia, the economics go along, business and housing go hand in hand. So we fulfill our mission with a holistic and inclusive approach to goals and objectives that prioritize public safety. You guys have probably heard Philadelphia has some serious issues with safety and security. Mobilization through re-education and training, affordable housing development, commercial corridor revitalization, arts and culture, and land maintenance. And when we say land maintenance, that means we're currently responsible for about 750 vacant parcels in the city of Philadelphia.
Mm.
So one of the first things we did was a community assessment to help determine the served neighborhoods or the projected neighborhoods that we looked at serving. So we conducted surveys, focus groups, and other outreach to make sure we were lockstep with the community in terms of their needs and desires. And we also reviewed some existing studies, some existing assessments from local universities. Temple University, LaSalle University, and Philadelphia University are our community partners, and we work very closely with them. So access to existing studies when we first came along was it was very helpful in us doing our own neighborhood assessment. The administration of the city of Philadelphia asked our president and CEO to pursue what was then our first contract, our first city contract, to provide supportive services in the Nicetown neighborhood and some surrounding neighborhoods. The Neighborhood Advisory Committee in Philadelphia, they're called NACs, and they're in neighborhoods with 51% or more low to moderate income residents. And next are governed by the Philadelphia Division of Housing and Community Development. So we went through a neighborhood, we went through a management review and basically a neighborhood review as well. And we were selected by the city in 2003 to provide those supportive services. When I say supportive services, that means people basically come to our community center as a one-stop shop. They can get assistance to pay their utility bills. Right now, we're doing a lot of phase 4 rental assistance, getting ready to go into mortgage assistance. And we've provided we processed hundreds of applications for that alone. Is very busy, as you can imagine. So people can come and get food. We do a lot of food distribution, a lot of community meetings, communicating with our block captains and things like that. So it's a neighborhood hub where there's computer labs and all kind of things like that, people helping people get jobs and things of that nature. So that's why it's so important to our process, because if we get buy-in from the neighborhood, it's very necessary in terms of doing any kind of economic or any kind of development in the neighborhood. This is just a quick look at some of the planning that we've done. So once we've done the assessments and then we look into planning, so we were told early on, you're nothing without a plan. So again, we started in 2003 with neighborhood plans. And initially, basically, they all focus on our commercial corridor. In our neighborhood, our commercial corridor runs right through the center of the neighborhood. And it's also, we also have an expressway that runs right across our commercial corridor in one of the blocks. It's very interesting right now. We're working with Congressman Dwight Evans to bring funding to a plan we have for the utilization of space under that expressway. Infrastructure funding. So we started with the plan for 40 parcels with a consultant, Portfolio Associates. Then, as you can see, we've done several additional plans that kind of focus on the commercial corridor, and some arts and culture is related to that. It's a transit-centered area. We have about six or seven different modes of transit that run either through our neighborhood or around. And the last plan we did, we're basically due for a new neighborhood plan. The last one we did, the development and implementation of our 10-year plan was done in 2012. So we're due for a new one. That one actually allowed us to include housing. A lot of times when you do commerce-related planning or anything associated with commerce, they previously did not include housing in that. But since everything has become associated with housing, housing is a big part of economics and the economy. So our last plan included housing along with our economic development on our commercial corridor. So planning included a lot of mapping. So looking through the neighborhood based on consensus from surveys and focus groups and things like that, and us just doing on the spot assessments of conditions of the neighborhood and everything like that. It allowed us to map out actually where we were going to go, exactly what we were going to do in terms of development that goes along with our supportive services. So this is one of our earlier maps that the City Planning Commission worked with us on, and it kind of shows where our targets were in terms of what we wanted to do. And we've actually, we've been told by the City Planning Commission that we were one of the rare community development corporations that actually stuck to our plan, and we've actually accomplished most of what was in our planning efforts. So I'm going to jump through some of this history, but just to let everybody know, Nicetown is a very historical area in Philadelphia, and it traces all the way back to William Penn. And we didn't just make up the name Nicetown. It came from a gentleman named John Nice. So a lot of the things that went on in the area, one of our major developments, in fact, it's our second scale development, is adjacent to the Wayne Junction, which is a very vital train station that was just redeveloped. And it's just an area where previously they did all this manufacturing and things like that. And over the years, the flight of industry, if you're kind of familiar with the flight of industry in a lot of historic industrial areas in cities, that brought on a lot of associated crime and unemployment and property abandonment. So these are all the things that we're dealing with today in trying to turn things around and transform the community. Some demographics, basically things that we got out of our assessments and research over the years, showing the number. Our neighborhoods are basically Afro-American Black people. And we have over the years also started to pick up on more Hispanic people, Asians, and there are some Caucasians in our neighborhood, but our neighborhoods, those we serve, are basically Black people, African Americans. Again, this is just a graph that kind of depicts that again, and this is not the 2020 census information. This is some of our initial demographics. This is the Nicetown CDC Community Center, kind of before and after shot. It's basically where I was talking about this hub of engagement of the community. People can come get a recycle bin. They can just about anything you can possibly think of, they think we can do here. And we try to exhaust our measures to do so, to assist people. And when we do have to refer somebody, we want to make sure we refer them to somebody that can really help them. These are some of the services we provide in our community center. And we do everything from community gardens to all types of assistance like foreclosure assistance, homelessness prevention, things like this. These are critical things, critical supports that we provide to the community and very needed in the areas such as ours with the high poverty rate and things like that. And we're trying to engage our people, and we do a lot of budgeting, counseling, and financial assistance to help people get out of poverty and start working themselves towards wealth building, no matter where they are. So it's a very heavy piece. A lot of work has to be done, but these are just some of the things that we do. Also, the Nicetown Business Association. We have to be in good touch with the businesses. Our businesses have suffered tremendously over the past couple of years, and we do a lot of technical assistance with the Department of Commerce and business centers and things like that to help stabilize and grow our local businesses. These are some of the volunteers in the community that we work directly with. Their Block Captain Committee in Nicetown is actually housed in our facility. Do a lot of communication about what's going on in the community, organizing cleanups, all that type of thing, just directly connected to the people in the community. And educating the community is key. Public safety, cleaning, beautification, these are things we're constantly engaged with our land care programs and just educating the community and helping them do for self. There's some more pictures of some of the things we do. As I mentioned about the infrastructure project, there's actually a proposed skate park that's going to be under the expressway. These are pictures of the community garden where we got new lights in the park. This is just a depiction of our annual Give Back to the Community Festival. Again, community engagement, arts, culture. We are very well connected to our elected officials. I can't leave that out. Can't do anything without them. So, this is something that we've been doing. This year was really our 19th year, but because of COVID, we had to skip a year. So it gets bigger and bigger every year. We also give out college scholarships to students on stage every year at our festival. It's a 2-day festival.
So I think that you have made the point.
Mhm.
Everything that the CDC does is connected to the community. That's the whole
Absolutely.
mission of the CDC.
Mhm.
We're gonna, let me move to Dr. Malcolm to bring him on to show his PowerPoint so that we can get to the questions of the audience. So just to the audience, what I want you to do is if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A box and I will ask them. Now, before we move on, Majeedah, please just tell us what this photo is at the bottom right here. It's a beautiful building.
Very quickly, this is our first scale project. It's called Nicetown Court 1. And as you can see, it's a before and after previous where all the people are standing. This is a visit from the mayor at that time. Brought his administration out to look at this old warehouse that was sitting there for years, almost 20 years abandoned. And we were able to get that taken down and then get the funding to fund Nicetown Court 1, which is 37 residential units. It's a mixed use facility. And also Temple University, Temple Physicians of Nicetown is one of our anchor tenants in that particular development.
Allahu Akbar. So we're gonna come back to you because you certainly have laid the groundwork. Wow, look at this. This is beautiful. You've laid the groundwork for the interest in those who are interested in opening nonprofit organizations, community corporations, that it can be achieved through family and friends and other business people. So Dr. Malcolm, we're gonna now come to you. Dr. Malcolm is the president and CEO of Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement, Inc. Dr. Malcolm, before you share your PowerPoint, give us a little introduction on who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Sister Muhammad, and I was impressed by Sister Rashid's presentation, and I'm happy to be here with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Malcolm Ali Punter. I am a member of the Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood in Harlem, New York, and have been so for over 20 years. And my introduction to Islam was as a teenager. And actually in the community of Warthi Muhammad. But my current Imam is Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, who of course is aligned with the mission of Warthi Muhammad and also Sheikh Tawfiq Rahimahullah Ta'ala. I'm a member of the board of the mosque. I take on responsibilities of operating and managing the real estate holdings of the Masjid. But in my day job, I'm also responsible for a considerably large portfolio of real estate assets owned by a coalition of houses of worship in the Harlem community. I am formally trained as a business person. I hold a doctorate in executive and strategic leadership, as well as an MBA. I also possess a law degree, and I've been in the business of real estate much of my adult life. Married to my beautiful wife, and we have been blessed with 3 children. And I guess that's an introduction.
So, Dr. Malcolm, the community corporation that you had is a faith-based community corporation. And I did look at your board, there's several reverends. And it's interesting that you're Muslim and you lead the community corporation. So tell us about what the mission of the corporation is. and how long you've been with them, and who are your demographics?
Sure. The Harlem Congregation for Community Improvement actually was envisioned in the early 1980s in the Harlem community, community that had been going through, much like the city of Philadelphia, a cycle of disinvestment, abandonment, increase of crime driven by the introduction, the purposeful introduction of heroin and cocaine and crack into the community, the Black community, as we've learned on purpose, to weaken the fabric and strength of the unity that had been developed through the civil rights movement by the followers of Martin and the followers of Malcolm, who became very active in establishing pride in the community. So under that backdrop, the Harlem community had been neglected, and in the community, the neighborhood in which Harlem is a very large community, as you might imagine. Harlem is large both in area as well as in population,
Right.
and many of it rivals, and it's not a city. It's merely a neighborhood, but that neighborhood rivals many of the largest cities throughout the United States. So we're talking about a densely populated area that in the 80s had about 500,000 residents, and majority of those residents were African American or people from the African diaspora. So in that context, and these are Harlem happened to be the streets where the activism happened, much like in other cities, and folks generationally remember that activism. And as you know, Malcolm was the minister of Mosque number 7, and that mosque still exists in the Harlem community currently. The imam is Imam Pasha, Majeedah Pasha. So it was very active. So the organization called HCCI was actually formed by clergy, primarily churches, but very early in its origin, the Muslims were invited and welcomed into that organization, and it was incorporated as Harlem Churches for Community Improvement. But in recognition of the contributions of the many Muslims in the Harlem community, the name was changed to Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement. And it is governed by a board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And in its founding documents, the board of directors have to consist of 15 members,
Mm-hmm.
and 2/3 of those members have to be derived from clergy that represents houses of worship in the Harlem community.
Mm-hmm.
So Imam Talib, my imam, is on the board of that organization and has been the longest serving board member on the organization. Imam Talib, Imam Pasha served on the board and still is a friend of the organization. And the organization has a loose network of members. Legally, they're not members, but they are part of the coalition. And those coalition members are the houses of worship in the community. And there are over 120 houses of worship that are members. And I make that distinction because the organization is not a Christian organization per se, although, just by virtue of population and the culture of African Americans, the majority of African Americans happen to be Christian. So there's more churches than mosques, but the Masjids are represented in the organization and continues to be so. And it's a faith-based organization, but it's not a religious organization.
I see.
Um,
So we'd like for you to share your, if you want to share your PowerPoint, or let me just ask this question. So to both of you, so funding sources, are they the same as if you own it through a family group or through a faith-based group, are funding sources the same? Is it based on the service you provide or the owner operator model?
I would guess I would say some of both, but with family-based, you have to make sure there's no conflict of interest and things are put in place to make sure there is none, internal controls and all that type of thing. The funding sources are diverse. We try to have a pretty diverse base of funders and not too much governmental reliance, although we are contracted with several government contracts presently. I would say we're about maybe 62% private. So, yes, that I would say yes. The funding comes from a diverse base, public and private partnerships.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the funding, as a not-for-profit organization, the CDC, or a development corporation, you are eligible to receive funds from all sources, as long as those funds are used for the charitable purposes. And I agree with Sister Rashid. You cannot, the funds cannot inure, and that's the legal terminology, inure to any individual board member, irrespective of where those board members are derived from. You are, as an employee of the corporation, allowed to draw a salary, but the Internal Revenue Service of the United States is very strict on any funds coming through an organization that has been granted charitable and nonprofit status.
Now, Dr. Malcolm, you have prepared a slide presentation for us. Would you like to share it with us?
I would.
Please.
I think it would be beneficial for the audience to
Okay.
see it. I won't take much time, but I want to give you some contrasting
Sure.
information based on.
And we want to give you that opportunity, and also to make sure that I thank our mutual friend, Imam Talib from Harlem. I want to make that distinction because there's an Imam Talib in Washington, D.C. as well. But we are talking about Imam Talib from Harlem,
Yes.
who introduced us, and I'm very grateful. He's a good friend of mine, as
Thank
well as yours. Yes.
Yes.
So we're ready when you are.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
I can see it clearly. I hope you can.
Yes, we can.
So the Harlem Congregations for Community Improvement has been in operation since 1986. So we're celebrating our 36th year of operations and uninterrupted operations. The core mission of the organization was to empower Harlemites and rebuild communities. And that mission statement still stands. What you're seeing here is myself with the former chair of the board, Dr. Joan Dawson, and then the current chair of the board of directors, his name is Reverend Keith Roberson. So the mission and goals of the organization, again, was the holistic revitalization of the Harlem community. And we're really talking about not the Harlem community of today that is revitalized. We're talking about the Harlem community of the early 80s and late 80s, which in the community, the neighborhood that we started out serving, which we called the Bradhurst section of Harlem, there were over 3,000 abandoned buildings in that 40 square block area. And as I mentioned, Harlem is vast. It's river to river, north to 162nd Street in Manhattan, down to 96th Street in Manhattan on the east side. So in this one section, which was 40 square blocks, there was 3,000 abandoned buildings, and it was quite a sight to see. In contrast to Lower Manhattan, which was fully built, the built environment was progressed and very vibrant and rich. But it was, the organization was founded as a coalition of interfaith congregations that was intended on implementing a comprehensive portfolio of programs, including housing, safe streets, et cetera. And to date, our organization has been able to leverage over $500 million in federal, state, and city support. I want to add that a not-for-profit organization is a bit of a misnomer. A CDC not-for-profit organization can and should seek to earn as much money as possible.
Okay.
In fact, that is our responsibility. The only exception is that those profits, if any, cannot be for the benefit of any one individual. You have to turn that money back into the organization and the organization's programs. And I'll give you an example. Most large hospitals are not-for-profit organizations. Most large academic institutions are structured as not-for-profit organizations. And in both examples, many of them have endowments in the hundreds of millions and even billions of the dollars. So that goes to the fact that they are well capitalized and well funded. So there's no limit on how much money you can generate as a not-for-profit, and you must operate the not-for-profit as a business. It is a business. It just has a designation as a charitable corporation, and however, it has to be operate with the same vigor and organization as any corporation out there.
So let me ask before you go to your next slide. So do all CDCs, are they located in the neighborhood that they serve? Can CDCs serve neighborhoods where they're not located?
So that's a good question that requires a distinction. I believe the way HCCI was organized, it was organized as a 501c3 corporation and not as a community development corporation. It is a community development corporation by virtue of the work it does, but it was not legally structured to limit itself to one area. So the certificate of incorporation, the bylaws were allowed the organization to grow, and I'll talk about how it has grown over time. But it has spent most of its life cycle in the neighborhood that is identified in its nomenclature, Harlem, but has now been reaching out to other areas in the country, and in the last 10 years in an effort to replicate the model, organize other houses of worship to do similar work, and to bring the mission, so to speak, to areas of need. So, yes.
Go ahead.
No,
No, so before you go to this slide, Majeedah, I want to hear your answer in terms of from a family-owned CDC.
I agree 100% with Dr. Malcolm in terms of reaching out to other areas and cities. Similar to us, we have a name that identifies where we're located, Nicetown, in the neighborhood in Philadelphia. But we have been sought out to do development in other areas. And right now we're engaged in a major development project in the western part of our city in West Philadelphia, as well as another one in the Logan section. So we're in different areas of the city doing development. And we're also, often requested to assist smaller startups or help them get started.
So in that case, in the answer that both of you gave, then when you open a CDC outside of the neighborhood that you're from, Dr. Malcolm, you're from Harlem, Majeedah, you're from Philadelphia, do you then seek, would the success of that CDC mean that you should seek out the professionals in the particular neighborhood or area that you're going to open a CDC? Should you be working with the people in that community?
Dr. Malcolm, did you want to go?
Yeah, I think that is the smart business pursuit. Even HCCI, having been known primarily as a Harlem-based organization, even working in neighborhoods as close as the Bronx, which is right across the river,
Right.
in the same city, it is better to work with people that are local to that area in partnership, because it improves the credibility of the organization. You have to remember that every time each CDC starts out, with a level of credibility that, the community that it serves lends to it. But as soon as you step out into someone else's neighborhood, you become a developer that needs to be, watched and questioned.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
Right?
yes,
Because
absolutely.
now you're becoming a little outside of your neighborhood,
Right.
becoming aggressive. So you should seek out partnerships with local communities, and in my opinion, that's the only way that you can stay true to your core message in serving people where they
Right.
are. You have to empower the local people before you start to do development in their communities.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Sister Majeedah.
They and communities expect that, especially if you're stepping outside of your familiar neighborhood. Sometimes it may be some question like, what are you doing over here? So in the city of Philadelphia, we have participation levels for minorities that we have to meet, mandated. Large scale developments trigger unions and things like that. So we have to be mindful of that and make sure we set up situations where our people can be a part of it. So some of the things we're doing now is making sure they're engaged in trainings that will allow them to be subcontractors and things like that. So, they get that opportunity. That's a great expectation, where we are. So we have to deliver.
Dr. Malcolm, please, let's go to your next slide.
Sure. So our core business is real estate development, and the organization was founded on the notion of recapturing the abandoned buildings in the neighborhood. We focus on affordable rental housing, but one of our key core competencies is building a portfolio of ownership versus rental housing. And we do so through developing cooperative housing structures as well as condominium units. So one of the myths that CDCs unfortunately are subject to is that they only supposed to develop very extremely almost poverty-stricken housing. That is not true, and that is really not even in the founding documents of HCCI. HCCI founding documents say the purpose was to develop low to moderate income housing, which is a band of incomes that should serve people of low means, but also people of civil servant earning incomes. And most of the time, the affordable housing formula that the United States housing and urban development has created only serves adequately to very low income folks, but leaves nothing of assistance for people that are income earners on a civil servant level. So if a husband and wife are both civil servants in New York City or any other city in the country, their combined income will exclude them from the assistance in the affordable housing realm, but they don't earn enough to go to market rate housing. It's certainly not in the city of New York. So they're left in this, the missing middle, as we've been calling them, that they can't even afford to stay in the very city that they are civil servants in, but they also can't move out to the outer counties, which have been the suburbs that have always had market prices above means of folks in the city, inner city. So the cooperative housing model that HCCI developed was really a model to serve the middle income folks, and we've done that quite successfully. And even today, we have 3 projects that we are developing, 2 of which are closing just now in this month of December, that will target that middle income band and produce 150 cooperative apartment units. And in order to get people prepared to transition from rental housing to ownership, we have a series of financial literacy programs, credit building programs. We even have a lending circle, which is a formalization of a SUSU that if you're in that network, paying back those social loans reports to your credit score, and successful payment could increase one's credit score from 30 to 60 points. And that could be the you know the difference between someone being eligible for a mortgage for a co-op or a condominium versus someone who would have to be in perpetual rentership.
What it sounds like to me, so far, what both you and Majeedah have described, is that the CDC is the arm for serving the community successfully. So, I mean, do we need more CDCs? I mean, it seems that, you've got all these people, that are homeless. You've got, single mothers. You've got people who can't afford housing. Do we need more CDCs, in the community? Do we not, are they not, the masjids be opening a CDC? Every masjid, it seems, should be opening a CDC.
I would say that the more the merrier, but sometimes CDCs have certain set boundaries, like what I described when I showed the mapping and things like that. Oftentimes we step outside of those boundaries for exactly what you're saying. There's maybe underserved or unserved pockets and things like that. So that's why collaboration and partnership is extremely critical. We do a lot of collaboration and partnerships, working with other CDCs, trying to get this tremendous amount of work out there, as you described and Dr. Malcolm described. So working together, we get a lot more bang for the buck. But I would say there's always room for more. But there might be a little something going on out there with people that are really attached to boundaries and things like that. But we try to partner and collaborate whenever we can.
Yeah, I think that the masjid must protect itself by creating a separate entity that would pursue this type of business venture. The city of New York, however, typically will not grant the real estate development financing to a religious organization. So the masjids are compelled, or any other house of worship, are compelled to create a separate entity outside of its religious corporation, if they're structured that way, to facilitate housing. And I'll tell you 2 masjids that have done it very well. The Mosque of Islamic Brotherhood, they've developed through a CDC, the very building where the masjid is located. And as a requirement under the city's financing regulations, that corporation had to be separate in all respects in order for the funding to pass to that corporation. So the board members have to be different from the board members in the masjid. And that's a regulatory requirement, as long as the city's financing is outstanding with respect to the property. Malcolm Shabazz Masjid has done that as well, very well, and they've developed a whole several blocks of housing that is adjacent to their masjid over the years. So I think that the mosque in certain neighborhoods have built their technical skills in order to do so, and as a result, brothers and sisters who have the skill set, like for example, in building construction, have been able to service the community and get paid for it through that CDC because they've earned the money, and you see the fruits of their growth as a result. So I would encourage any masjid who has a community that needs to be developed that they explore that notion, but do your homework, understand the legal ramifications, and don't. And I heard this last week on your program from the financial experts. You cannot commingle the masjid money with the CDC money.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yes. Dr. Malcolm, we could go to your next slide.
So we also do commercial revitalization. So we start the business merchants associations and housing counseling. We also have supportive housing. We work with seniors, and we've been very successful in developing senior housing. We own 3 senior housing buildings that were partly financed by HUD and the city of New York. And then we have some set-aside apartments in our multifamily buildings that help young people who aged out of foster care. And with supportive housing, what the financing law allows you to do is pick a population that's underserved, and you can build that into the housing development that you structure. For example, if you have a building that you're going to have 100 apartments, you could say, at least here in the city of New York, you could say to the city housing finance agency, we want to set aside 30% of those units for homeless youth, or youth that have returned to the community from a period of incarceration, or for women, or experiencing domestic violence. That financing allows you to do that. The way the city sees it is really homeless housing, but you can tweak that homeless housing model to fit the needs of your respective community. So your listeners would know what's most needed in their community, and they can structure that into a supportive housing model.
Let me ask this question, because I see that both CDCs, Nicetown and the CDC that you lead, Dr. Malcolm, are heavily involved in housing. Can a CDC be successful just on services? For example, we have young people in our community who have been performing services for 15 years. I can tell you one right now, Camp Cahill. They have been taking young people, they have been planning summer camps every year. Can they open a CDC and be successful without housing development being a part of it?
The CDC model, by legal definition, has to have some form of community development and housing or other land type of development. You can also, any non-for-profit organized for the purpose can provide services, but the benefit of a CDC is that you get the opportunity to build through housing development and also include services as part of your model. They're not exclusive mutually, they can be integrated.
Got it. So a CDC basically is community development, which includes housing.
Housing and some form of land improvement, yes.
I got it. Is this your next slide, Dr. Malcolm?
This is an important slide, community engagement. Community engagement for us is done through empowering the residents in the buildings that we operate, through tenant associations, and also helping them learn how to operate the building themselves. And in some cases, we after a period of time, built into the structure of the housing, we intend to turn the building over to the residents.
Wow.
Now, that's really an innovative model, because most people, once they get a hold of real estate, they don't want to transfer it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we went out through the purpose of the housing. We want to turn it over to the residents, because we believe that the residents should be empowered and they should have ownership. And that's primarily the model for the cooperative buildings. We help the co-ops operate and through the financing model that was created in 1986, the Tax Reform Act of 1986 signed into law at that time, created what is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. And that Low-Income Housing Tax Credit is actually a national program. So anybody that's interested in developing or organizing a CDC or otherwise even doing housing as a for-profit, there is a national source of financing in all 50 states and other territories that's available to you by acts of Congress. No state can eliminate this source of funding, and the funding is distributed and allocated every year through a qualified allocation plan that's registered in your state and in your city, if there's a city housing authority, and you just have to apply for it. I mean, you have to have certain experience to apply and be successful, but that source of funding is called the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit. And what happens is that the non-for-profit or even a for-profit sponsor applies for the credit. If they get awarded the credit, and they're awarded the credit based on the type of housing, how many people they're going to serve, the low income versus the high income ratio of that housing, you will then be awarded credits which will be sold to a investor entity, and that investor entity will fund your real estate development project. And this program that was organized in 1986 has been the most successful housing program in the nation's history, and every one of you could apply and get awarded. And there's certain set asides for nonprofits, but you also can do it through your for-profit entity if you wish to. And that has been really the success of the organization. And when I mentioned that we've leveraged over $500 million in 36-year history, that $500 million came primarily from those low-income housing tax credits. And the closings that we have even this month, we're closing 4 projects, one in the city of New York, which is 2 cooperatives, one in Atlanta, Georgia, that's the expansion I was mentioning, and that's going to be 250 apartments, and then one in Columbia, South Carolina, which will be 200 apartments in a sort of a ranch and style development format. In Atlanta, it's going to be a high rise, and those monies came primarily from low-income housing tax credits. You have to get other sources of financing to make the capital stack complete, but the brunt of the construction financing will come from the low-income housing tax credits, and it's really an innovative source, and we hope that it continues to be available. And it's based on a per capita population in the states that you live in, and it's funded every year by act of Congress. It's not something that runs out. We also have community improvement group meetings where we meet with the city agencies like the police department, sanitation, the parks department, the health department, and we bring in certain community leaders so that they can have a one-on-one opportunity to speak to these government officials, so that the government officials agree to address the quality of life issues that these community leaders bring to them. And we've been operating that particular meeting for over 30 years, and it has really improved the organization's relationship with the police department particularly, and we've been able to avert a lot of different issues based on that relationship.
So CDCs also play a major role in influencing community justice, equality, and mutual respect.
That's correct.
Outside of of course, housing is very important. I mean, but so let me ask you about grants. Are there particular sites that you go to find these grants? Are these grants sent to you once you're an established CDC? How do you find grants? Well, let me ask you, Majeedah, as a startup, uh,
Mhm.
how do you find a grant if you are not a faith-based? Because I know with faith-based, they seek you out because of the influence that you have in the community and in terms of working across all lines. But
Mhm.
as a family-owned CDC, where do you find grants?
Well, basically, initially early on, and I just want to commend Dr. Malcolm, unbelievable. I got to come see you. But we started out basically on our own with some direction from our elected officials who actually know where these resources are. As Dr. Malcolm talked about, the low-income housing tax credits.
Mhm.
Our first two scale projects were, we call them LIHTC projects in Philly. And that's a available option of funding. But once you get aligned to some degree, we're not supposed to be all really doing that with these elected officials, but I can't hardly do anything without them. They actually direct you to these sources of funding. Association that I'm with, Philadelphia Association of CDCs, that's what they do all, for the most part, is to leverage funding, create funding sources and things like that for CDCs that are doing all of these different types of projects and programs. So best practices amongst CDCs and others like that have been ways that we've identified sources of funding, and then ongoing research. It's a job. I mean, that's somebody's job to identify specific resources for specific programs and projects. But I just want to say that it's just good to see that we're at the table doing these things. And this kind of platform actually allows people to see that we're doing it and hear what we're doing and how we're doing it, because a lot of people don't actually know. And I'm just, thankful to Allah that we're able to be a part of it, to make change in our communities, very needed change. But the resources are out there. You build your connections over the years. And as Dr. Malcolm said, it's a little different for the way we started building that level of influence. When we always say we started out scratching at the door and knocking on doors and all that kind of thing. But once you deliver and prove your capacity or your ability to deliver, that influence will lead resources to you. That's been our experience for some part. So the more you do, the more people are attracted to what you do, and it will invite you to do it, not only where you serve, but in other locales.
That's consistent with everything. The better you are, the more we work to prove ourselves, and then we expect to be at the table. It doesn't always happen like that, but at least we have, the case to make a case then that you've proven yourself. Dr. Malcolm, let me ask you, I was always under the impression that nonprofits, that there is a line drawn in the sand in terms of their political involvement. So, and because I hear
Yeah.
Sister Majeedah talking a lot about it, but
Well,
I
I mean,
understand.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think there's some legal lines and there's some cultural lines.
Okay, then.
The legal line is the notion that a nonprofit organization cannot participate in political activism
Okay.
or lobbying. And that restriction from lobbying or participating in electioneering is a Internal Revenue Code restriction.
Okay.
In exchange for your non-for-profit status, the Internal Revenue Service says you cannot participate in election endorsements or electioneering, and you cannot lobby.
Okay.
It is not a hard and fast rule because you can do some lobbying, but you can't make your activities over a certain percentage of lobbying. If you do, then you're subject to getting your non-for-profit status revoked and also paying penalties.
So you can self-promote though. So that's a big part of it is
Right.
what Sister Majeedah and Nicetown do. They're very good at self-promotion,
Right.
which is making themselves known to the powers to be
Sure.
in order to make sure
Yeah.
that work is recognized. Is that correct?
Yes, because you can apply for funding. Most city councils or whatever in one's city they call them have block grant monies that come through the city council structure.
Mm.
And New York is kind of complex because they have a city council that has the ability to give funding. They also have the mayor who has the ability to give funding. And then each borough in New York City has a borough president who also has funding. And then you have the state level funding and the federal level funding. So it's really impossible to operate a non-for-profit organization without asking your local elected official for some money. Now,
So
you can't tell them,
please go ahead.
you can ask for money through the application process, but you can't make any promises to the elected official.
Got
And they
it.
shouldn't be making any promises to you.
Okay. And so that kind of leads me to my next question. And Dr. Malcolm, we do want to continue with your PowerPoint, but that leads me to my next question. And that is how does the CDC is able to maintain their integrity in terms of staying with their mission, receiving these grants? How do you protect that? How do you maintain your integrity?
I think board governance and organizational governance is the key to remaining mission aligned and not experiencing mission drift. And training amongst your staff,
Okay.
and then I think Sister Rashid said it earlier, having checks and balances.
Okay.
Having checks and balances, and we know that it's very difficult when you get a personality driven organization as opposed to a organization mission driven entity. So you want to make sure that your board members are involved and are independent. And an independent board members is something specifically defined.
Independent of
An independent board member is defined as a board member that has no entanglements, no conflict of interest with the organization. And and the theory of that is that they can make a decision just purely based on what's in the best interest of the organization.
Got it.
So as long as you have folks that have that independence and maintain the independence, then that's why you don't have a few board members, you have an adequate amount of board members, because we believe that everybody's not going to make the wrong decision, that there's somebody that's going to say, I don't think that's right, or question that particular action, or bring some resource that gives clarity to the motive that the organization might, motive and mode of operation that the organization might be going into.
How many board members do you have on your board?
Our organization requires 15 board members.
And what about you, Sister Majeedah?
We currently have 9. 9. Yeah, we just added another board member.
Dr. Malcolm, can we go to your next slide?
Sure. I mean, this is just a youth development expansion on the youth development programs, after school daycare, and this is the equitable development division, which really focuses on financial literacy, home buying education, and small business. And then we do a series of events that in the model of a traditional non-for-profit that is supposed to result in earning income or earning contributions, I should say. But primarily, HCCI has been a fee income earning type of non-for-profit, meaning that we earn most of our fees as opposed to getting most of the fees from contributions because of the real estate development. In exchange for your providing housing, your non-for-profit CDC gets to earn developer fees. And if you have a multi-million-dollar real estate project, your developer fees can become very healthy because generally they are a percentage of the construction budget. So if it's a $50 million project and you're earning a 10% developer fee, your CDC can earn about $5 million.
Let me ask you this question before you go on. What is the core personnel of a CDC? What personnel do you absolutely have to have?
You have to have operations folks that administer the programs.
Mm-hmm.
But the lifeblood of a CDC is your financial department. And that financial department has to be independent and similarly to how I described the board members' independence. Mm-hmm. They need to have the freedom to analyze financial information without fear. If they decide that something is uncomfortable to them, and we have governing rules that allow for that independence for the finance folks. But generally operations people, finance people, and you have to have development folks. Development folks' job is to go out and search for grants, find money and opportunities. And of course, if you're a real estate oriented CDC, you have to have people experienced in real estate development and real estate finance and property management and maintenance operations. But the core of any non-for-profit has to be the operations and the finance department, and of course the board of directors.
So, Sister Majeedah, I can understand that from an interfaith group where everybody goes home to their own house, but from a family-owned business, when you have to sit at the table with each other, how do you maintain that?
Well, you have to make sure you pray before you do all these meetings. But it's just being able to just have a shared, we all share in this mission and what it's going to take to, get things done. And I hear loud and clear Dr. Malcolm talking about the essential parts of an organization, definitely physical management, financial department, and operations, development team, project managers, that type of thing. So when you have your family kind of integrated between all of these different departments, to me, it's very helpful. Family, you have that built-in sense of trust and integrity, and it's a shared thing. And a lot of times when everybody else that's working together see that, it's infectious, and as it should be. It's like you demand a certain level of integrity, determination, and commitment, and things like that. So everybody's on the same accord and working towards the same mission, and trying to make sure there is none of that mission drift. A lot of times when organizations sometimes things may shift, and you find a lot of organizations find themselves grant chasing. So in order to avoid those type of things, it's good to have family that's all on the same accord and can share those type of values. It creates a certain value system within the organization that's shared, and people that come on board, they know what the expectations are. So I think that's the benefit from our perspective of having family.
Mm. I mean, both of you, should be commended tremendously for what you do, because leading an interfaith group as large as the one that you lead, Dr. Malcolm, and then Majeedah being a part of a family CDC, and the success of that, and you made a point that it's been very consistent. You've had very few turnovers. I mean, those are commendable characteristics. I mean, that, you have people one-on-one who find it so difficult to get along, and to be able to achieve what you all have achieved. I mean, I hope that the audience really can appreciate the leadership that both of you are providing to the success of the CDC. Which brings me to my next question. So what are the 5 key successes of an interfaith? And then what are the 5 key successes of forming a family-owned CDC? And I know we've gone over it some, but I want to kind of sum it up for people so that they can understand it from putting them all together for us. Put them all together for us. What would you say are that a family-owned CDC, the 5 keys to getting owning and operating a CDC? Sister Majeedah.
Okay. I would just, right off the top of my head, I would say it starts with a strong board. Just right out of the door. Just the fact that we've had a strong board over the years. As I said, we have had some changes and things like that. A lot of times people like their boards to have short terms, term limits and things like that. But our board has been very strong and known for its strength over the years, and it's helped us to move forward with everything that we had to do with the respect that they each garner in their own rights. The second success is our success with the community. A lot of times establishing trust and buy-in, things like that from the community is a struggle initially. But and a lot of times so many things have happened in terms of development in different cities, different neighborhoods, that lack of trust isn't there. So you have to establish trust in spite of what some of the beliefs are. And I think that we've been pretty successful. That's one of our niches, is community engagement, bringing people on, hiring people from the community and things like that in order to establish and build that trust. The third thing I would say was being consistent and true to your mission. Just being consistent and always, even educating our staff, the community, about exactly what our mission is and what we're here for. And then that way, a lot of times that'll keep you from kind of diverting away from that, because if everybody knows what you're supposed to be there for, I think we've been pretty good at establishing that and being true to our mission. A lot of times CDCs and nonprofits get audits, and Dr. Malcolm probably is aware of this. You get audits and there should be a whistleblower in the in-house. So I'm actually the whistleblower identified by our auditor. And it's interesting that once you can maintain that type of integrity for real and believe in yourself, then I think that's a big success with us as well. And it keeps us going. The other thing is just like what we've accomplished in terms of mixed use development, affordable housing, and making sure we're providing this, making an impact with turning things around with availability of affordable housing. We have a lot more work to do because we have a lot going on with homelessness and just getting our people to the point where they can access affordable as well as market rate housing. I think that's one of our successes. And the other is just what we've done to revitalize our commercial corridor that runs through the Nicetown neighborhood. It's interesting that I'm saying that last, but a lot of people kind of know us for that. I think that economic development on commercial corridors is the local lifeblood of the neighborhood, you know, trying to stabilize that and grow it and establish employment for locals and things like that. I think been visibly noticeable that we've impacted the neighborhoods like that as well. So I think that's another one of our successes.
That's great. What about you, Dr. Malcolm?
Yeah, I think that having a clear organizational strategic plan where everyone, the staff, as well as the board, understand the direction that the organization is and should be going in. Board governance is important. Sometimes board members are on the board for a very long time, but they may not go through periods of training upgrades. Because as you can imagine, many of clergy people, that's their vocation is in the religious arts, so to speak. They're not in the finance arts or the legal arts. So they may need training, or they may need to rely on experts in order to better govern the corporation or the non-for-profit. So the second, certainly the strategic plan. The second one is the continuous improvement through training. And many of these training protocols are offered pro bono through local law firms and even the city agencies themselves. And then also staff training, make sure that they understand what the ethics requirements are for the organization, the expectations of their particular roles and responsibilities, and wherever they feel inadequate in terms of expertise, that they have a listening ear in their leadership that will assist them in making sure that they obtain those skills and knowledge, skills, and abilities. Make sure that you maintain your financial records so that you can have your audits and financial statements filed with your state and federal agencies on time. Never miss any of them. and make sure that the books are opened and closed properly through proper financial stewardship of your records. And then finally, make sure that you open your doors to the wider community. The worst thing you can do is operate in a vacuum. So you want to not only have staff members that are paid and board members that are governors, but you also want to have volunteers from the community have access to your operations through volunteerism. And they may be your best advocates as an organization, but they also will be your best guardians, right? Because the streets know what's happening. And so you want to make sure you rely on those folks. And fortunately, HCCI, as having its origins in the houses of worship, there is really a network of people in the community that at the pulse of the organization, right, to the clergy that are on the board and regular organizations. And if you allow me, I'll show you a list of.
Sure.
This is the board members of the organization. You see Imam Talib, Abdul Rashid,
yes,
and others who are on the board, and Imam Ezekiel Pasha, who's one of the friends of the organization.
Oh, okay.
But a this is the membership of houses of worship of the organization. So I mean, this is 100 or so,
Wow.
and these are organizations, and not only houses of worship, but individuals and businesses can become members.
Let, let me ask you a question. So what is the responsibility of the members?
I mean, we ask them to contribute nominally, a nominal annual fee. So
Okay.
for individuals, it's generally $100, houses of worship, nonprofit $250, small business $500, and corporate $1,000. And it's really really not intended to be a fee or income generator, but it's really an acknowledgement of alignment with the mission of the organization. And then we publish, what the membership would get in terms of benefits. If your house of worship is being approached by a predatory real estate developer, we'll take you through the steps in order to safeguard your property, and that has become an issue, both for masjids and churches all over the country. So we'll provide technical assistance. If an individual or a commercial building needs to know what the value of their property is, I'm a licensed real estate broker. I have several licensed real estate brokers in our staff. They can tell them what the price of their property might be, and so they won't be misled by someone seeking to do a transaction with them. And then we have small business assistance, budgeting, credit counsel, and an array of services that we provide to the folks that we identify as linked to the organization.
And let me stop you there, Dr. Malcolm, for a second. And anyone can become a member outside. Can they members outside of Harlem in any state?
Yes, we will accept membership. We have a membership person that will vet the organization and make sure that they have alignment with our mission. But because we're expanded in other areas, I've been out to Seattle, Washington on 3 separate occasions working with a group of houses of worship there because they're being displaced and gentrified out of their own community. So we are doing a lot of anti-gentrification work and training and providing technical assistance on folks organizing their own,
You
faith.
have a whole list of the benefits of becoming a member. So how does a person access this information?
Yeah, all of the information is on our website, www.hcci.org. It's pretty easy to remember.
Can you
H as in Harry, Charlie as in Charlie. I think I can do it once I stop sharing. I'll put it in before we conclude.
Because I'm sure that there are many on this Zoom right now that would love to know what this membership is and be able to access it. This is a good resource for us as a community. This is a good resource. Let me ask you this question while you're seeing if you can put the website on. Can you remember the first service you ever provided? And with that question, was it a learn on the job kind of a situation for you, Majeedah?
Yes, I remember it very clearly. The first service we provided was something suggested by a neighborhood volunteer, and it was food distribution. We have serious food insecurity issues, and she had some expertise in terms of how to establish that, what agencies to connect with, and it was actually our first service program.
Wow. What about you, Dr. Bowman? Can you remember the first service that you provided through your CDC?
I certainly can tell you an example of an impact. I mean, I was in the real estate business prior to joining HCCI, but what's most gratifying is when, long after you've forgotten you've helped somebody out or provided a service, that they come to you and say, don't you remember, I was homeless and I couldn't even, take care of my children, and you assisted me with housing. And that happened recently. I was actually interviewing a young lady who was a resident of one of our buildings, who relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. She was able to establish her own restaurant there.
Mhm.
So I said to my staff, it's a good idea to interview her because, she's an example of, one of the alumni of HCCI. So in the course of that interview, she revealed that when I was able to get her the housing, that she came out of the shelter system with her children.
Mm.
Of course, that's not something I remembered about my interaction with her, because I was so caught up in the fact that she was successful as a business person. But what was meaningful to her was not that she was successful as a business person relocating from New York to Atlanta, Georgia, but that act of kindness of helping and taking the time to help her find that apartment and to get out of that shelter with her children was what was impactful. And the only thing I could say is alhamdulillah, because there's no way I could have remembered that, and it's only by Allah that it was even reminded.
Alhamdulillah.
There's 1,000 more questions that we can that I could ask, and 1,000 more that you can answer, but we have come to the end of our time. What I'd like to do, though, is if you can both repeat, or both of you give your websites where people can go on and learn more about what your CDC does, and so that if they need to be in contact with you, where they can write you. So Sister Majeedah, if you could give your website first, that would be wonderful.
Okay, our website is www.nicetowncdc.org, NICETOWN
And Dr. Malcolm?
Yeah, and our website consists of our acronym, which is www.H as in Harry, C as in Charlie, C as in Charlie, I as in Idaho.org, HCCI.org.
Naima has just put both of the websites in the chat so people can access it. Just to our listening audience, this recording will be available on studyalislam.com website, studyalislam.com website. In a few days, you can go back and listen to it. And you now have both Sister Majeedah and Dr. Malcolm's website where they can be reached and ask any questions. That list of membership benefits would probably be useful to many of those who are on this Zoom right now. I'd like to give both of you a few minutes to just give closing comments, and then I will just remind the audience that tomorrow Enterprise will be on to talk about land development, faith-based land development. They're one of the premier developers, partners in the business. Dr. Malcolm knows that, he's shaking his head. So we hope that you'll come back tomorrow at this time, 6:30, using the same link. Sister Majeedah, can you give just some closing comments to our audience?
I don't know where to begin, but again, I want to thank you for inviting me to be a participant on this panel, and also being able to be on the panel with Dr. Malcolm. It's fantastic. I just want to say that this kind of shows from two different perspectives that the work can be done on many levels, many different areas of service, development, economic development, as well as housing development. It shows that we can do it from many perspectives, small scale, large scale, neighborhood level, citywide level, and nationwide level. So that is, to me, is extremely exciting that we are here, we're doing it. And I'm just thankful to be able to show from our perspective. Thank you.
And I thank you. Dr. Malcolm?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for this wonderful program. I'm very grateful, Sister Muhammad, that you have established this and continue to do so. And I'm honored to have been on the panel with Sister Rashid. And I thank all of you for joining. And, you know, I think what's important is that we figure out a way to help as many of our neighbors as possible. I think that is our mandate in Al-Islam, and certainly that's a mandate, in my opinion, for your right to live on this earth as a human being. You know, we should do as much as we can to make it easier for our neighbor. And I thank you again for allowing me to participate.
Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am to both of you. And as I said, our prophet, peace be upon him, he built a model city in Medina based on alliances, and us working together and calling and respecting the minds of those who have the expertise. So I didn't do anything other than to follow the prophet that we all say we believe, and who's our leader. And so I just called the best minds, and both of you were gracious enough to accept and to realize that we're never going to be a free people. And when I say we're never going to be a free people, I mean those who are underserved. They come in all colors and all religions, but they will never be free. We will never be free until we learn to respect each other, the knowledge that you bring, the leadership that you bring, and we come together and work as one. So I am humbled and gracious, and I thank you both truly from the bottom of my heart. And I hope that people listening will turn to you for your guidance and your leadership, and know that ain't no stopping us now. We're in it now, and we're continuing. So thank you very much. Have a good evening to your family and the time. Be safe. And inshallah, we will all meet back tomorrow at 6:30 when we will hear from Reverend Joseph from Enterprise to talk about faith-based land development and go into more details about what both of you have achieved with your CDC, and that is housing, developing and building housing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.